Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm Paul with the Voice for Men, and I have the distinct pleasure today to be talking to somebody that I have been a fan of for a number of years since I became involved in the online men's movement. I have been good friends with Dan Moore. I have been knock down, drag out enemies with Dan Moore. I have been ambivalent with Dan Moore. I have been ambiguous with Dan Moore. I have crossed every spectrum in some sort of connection with a human being that you can possibly cross. But what I've come down to is that Dan Moore is a committed advocate for men and boys, and a very, very thoughtful one that has contributed immeasurably, if I can speak English for our English-speaking audience. He has contributed immeasurably in many different ways to what's going on with the men's movement, particularly on the online version of it. So without further ado, I'd like to say welcome Dan Moore, also known as Factory.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I'm very, very glad to have you. Tell you what, we got a lot to talk about here. I mean, and by a lot, I mean I know that you have a really big project coming up that we're going to get into in terms of an online magazine, and we're going to talk about that a little bit closer to the end of this interview. But what I wanted to do first was just start digging into the past, as it were, and sort of our mutual observations of whatever we want to call it, the online men's movement, the manosphere, the dark pit of hell, according to feminists, whatever it is, this thing that seems to be happening and now is taking legs of its own and moving to the ground and moving into the mainstream like we probably did not imagine years ago. But I'll start this off with a memory of my first foray into looking at actually using the internet as a platform to get this message across, because I've been doing this far predating the internet in my own ways, in different ways, and I was poking around and looking at things. I was part of the Rod Van Mechelen's Backlash Forum 15, 16 years ago, where we had literally dozens of people a week that came into there and read our writings. But I started looking at YouTube, and one of the very first YouTubes that I came across was this gentleman here with a message as he was calmly sipping on a cup of what is alleged to be coffee. I'm not sure what was really in the cup, but he was talking about the problems that feminism had caused, and basically taking a look at feminist reactions to say, well, if you don't like these problems, then fix them. And his response was, well, hey, look, I didn't make these motherfucking problems. You did. So basically the end of his message was fix it or fuck off. And I thought, hey, I like this guy. I don't know what it is about him, but I like this. And I knew, compared to some of the other material I had seen on the internet where people were saying, gee, feminists, could we sit down over some scones and a cup of latte and lift our pinky fingers and talk about ways where we might find common ground? Dan Moore was saying, fuck common ground. We don't have any common ground. We never had any common ground. We better start taking our own ground. So if we can go back that far, this was 2006, 2007, something like that.
Yeah, probably actually even a little earlier than that, now that I think about it. Yeah.
So what moved you to do that particular video at that particular time?
Well, I don't know if you remember, but around that time, there was a lot of debate within the men's movement about whether we should be talking nicely with feminists, the Glenn Sachs approach, or if we should be more confrontational, and that was sort of what led to the formation of the Superior at the time. And excuse me, basically what I found is that the arguments were always the same. It was around and around and around. It was the same thing. It was a wild goose chase. It's always the same responses. And no matter how many times we have the same argument with the same people, They come back a week later saying the same crap that we just completely destroyed a week before. So when you factor that into the idea of sort of male hyperagency, female hypoagency, and how that the feminist narrative was basically saying women didn't do anything because we can't do anything, we're powerless individuals, therefore the only people out there that can do anything are men, so if you're not out there doing it, then I guess nobody's going to do it. I've always sort of had the belief that men alone don't have the social cachet to even just be considered as a group. Even to this day, it's very difficult to find anybody that would even actually talk about men as a demographic that deserve to be talked about in anything but derogatory terms. So it kind of led to a bit of a frustration on my part, but at the same time a bit of a clarity, because, well, it was frustrating and angry. It made me angry that all of this effort that we had been putting in trying to convince people that we're, even at that time, we sort of still believed that feminists would eventually turn around and say, oh, men are human too, blah, blah, blah. And that was roughly a video that basically happened right in around the time where I kind of made the realization that they have absolutely zero intention of ever treating men fairly, ever. And not only that, but they have absolutely zero intention of even listening to men honestly. So that's when I sort of realized that going on the attack is really the only option that we have available as MHRMs. We can't negotiate, because to negotiate you have to be negotiating from a position of power. You can't negotiate anything when you have nothing to negotiate with. So basically, what I did was I kind of decided, okay, well, I'm just going to attack them. Because they did this. It's not us. We didn't do it. We're suffering for it. They did this. And it's up to them to fix it. And what it really boils down to is it's the fixation of the blame, which they've been trying for years to put on men, but I think belongs to feminists in particular. And in general, I think there is a fair bit of guilt that women as a sex do have to take on. They have to take ownership for that. They didn't say a thing while men were being trampled all over the place. That's not excusable. I'm sorry, it's not.
Would you say it's fair to retrospectively to look back and say, well, by God, you were proved right, that there was nothing happening in the men's movement at all? And people lose sight of the fact there's been a men's movement over 100 years. This is not something that was born as a reaction to gender feminism in the 1960s. I mean, certainly gender feminism played a significant role in aggravating circumstances and in exploiting weaknesses in men as a group that were already there. But there were, from E. Belfort Bax on to the individuals, one man, and I'm drawing a blank on his name now, even though I do actually, I can probably get it because I have a picture of, this is a picture right here from 1929. And the individual here this guy in the center, and again I'm forgetting his name, I'll get it off the back of this thing. Sam Reed was known as the alimony martyr, and he elected to spend 3 years in prison from 29 to 32 because he did not want to pay lifetime alimony for somebody he was no longer responsible, or should no longer have been responsible for. There have been efforts to go at this for years and decade after decade after decade, and it never gained traction until somebody said that, fix it or fuck you. And so I want to say, from my perspective, that you were born out to be quite correct in that assumption. We actually do have a men's movement going now, but it didn't happen because somebody stood up and said, let's have a nice chat about gender issues.
Well, no, I mean, years ago, say about 08, maybe, 2008. Um, the men's movement basically was just a collection of blogs, tripod blogs, blogger blogs that with horrible themes. Generally speaking, it was just one or two guys that were commenting on each of them. There was almost no real interaction between the blogs. There were some, but when you really get down to it, the manosphere itself didn't really exist until about 2008, 2009, and that is what I think triggered what we call now the modern men's movement. I think that the coming together of all these disparate blogs, all these different areas of thinking, that is what actually created the reaction that you're seeing now, because there's a lot of very, very thoughtful things being said and done. And while a lot of people might think that it's the actions, for example, of MGTOWs are not going to have any effect, they're wrong. There's just no way to put it. They're wrong. It is having an effect already.
Let's dig a little deeper into that. Not necessarily right now with the MGTOW thing. I do want to get to that, but this sort of spontaneous immersion of websites like Men's News Daily starting to hit into very high traffic, and then we had bloggers like Roosh and Royce come up, and we had other men's advocates. Don't worry, Royce, Roosh, I'm not calling you a men's rights activist. I'm just saying that part of this larger phenomena of men gathering to speak to the issues that faced men in reality. And I'm going to say I agree with you. Anybody who thinks that MGTOW has not had an impact is disconnected from reality. They really are. If they think that PUA has not had an impact on the culture at large, they're disconnected from reality.
Well,
go ahead.
Not to put too fine a point on, I mean, you mentioned there's the 3 R's of the manosphere: Royce, Roosh, and Rollo, all of which were actually commenters on the So Suave PUA forums at the same time. So was a guy by the name of Pook, who sort of was a forerunner for MGTOWs. So without that cross-pollination, none of that stuff would have happened. None of it.
Absolutely. That was the pavement being laid for people to build structures on of all sorts of different kinds. But speaking of that pavement, obviously there is, and I'm not going to get into a chicken and egg argument on this, or even a philosophical debate on which came first. There has been a lot of friction between many elements of those communities. There have been, if you're asking me from my perspective, I've sat back and I've seen people in the game community and some people in the PUA community have been taking pot shot after pot shot after pot shot of MRAs for years without, I don't think, a disproportionate response, but there has been responses, so there's been friction. Why is there, when we are talking about groups of men who essentially are reacting to the same problems, PUA is, to me, a reaction to the sexual zeitgeist we live in. It's a necessary function because just this whole romantic love notion of I'm going to find somebody and just fall in love with them, for a lot of guys, that runs into a dead end and runs into things like, I don't know, jail, child support, things like that. Same thing with the game community, and same thing with the MRA community, which is why we support the principles of MGTOW, why we write about it, why we appeal to a MGTOW audience in as many ways as we can. We do take exception to the separatist, every woman is a bitch and a hoe, don't get near any of them. but that I've always maintained is a small fraction on the periphery. That is a fringe element of what a lot of men believe in that are parts of those communities. But why do you think there has been friction between these communities?
It's a really interesting question. I don't really know. When you look at, well, a really, really good example, for example, is the red pill subreddit versus the men's rights subreddit. There's a certain amount of the white knighty sort of approach. I'm the one good man. I'm better than you because I don't believe what you do. No matter how crappy men's rights activists are, at least they're better than red pill, or vice versa.
Yeah.
There's really no way around it. Most of that is truthfully probably based in either cynicism or naivety. I think that a lot of MRAs are very naive about female nature. I think a lot of PUAs and red pillars are cynical. And I think that my approach throughout most of this has been basically that out of each of these groups, they're blind men feeling an elephant, each of them. No one's got the right answer. Somewhere in the middle of these groups is the right answer, but that's almost like a false compromise. I don't know where the right answer is. I just think that we are the right people to do it, to find it. And,
yeah, these are questions that are going to take more than a few blog posts to answer.
Yes. Yes, they absolutely are.
I wonder if you think that part of the friction that seems to naturally occur and pop up from time to time, and I'm not, believe me, when I'm talking about this friction, look, folks, I'm not talking about, somebody that was at ABFM and was asked to leave and then goes off and pretty much makes a career out of attacking ABFM after that. That's not what I mean by the friction. That's just one dude doing their own thing, or a couple of dudes, or a dude and a chick doing their own thing. Not the same thing. But the overall friction between the communities, sometimes I wonder how much that has to do with the tendency of men to operate in hierarchies. And that there is always sort of, and I mean, I'm not trying to play Jesus here. I'm just as guilty as anybody. There's always the tendency in men to sort of outright each other about how things are supposed to work. Do you think that could possibly play a role in some of this?
I think yes, but that again, a minor role. You'll have the people that are saying, I don't like so-and-so because so-and-so is doing it wrong. That's more or less a power play. But the bigger problem is actually the gynocentric approach that everybody seems to take, including a lot of MRAs. Paul, I'm really sorry. Can we pause this for a little bit? Is that a possibility?
We can do anything you want. I can, if you need to do something, I can sit here and run my mouth. I can talk trash about you behind your back. If you have to leave the room, I can.
Sure.
We can't really put it on hold. Okay. Yes.
5 minutes. Okay. Be right back. Sorry about this.
No problem. Okay, folks, since Dan Moore has yet again abandoned me to sit here and take this over for what I hope is 5 minutes, I'm going to take a diversion here a little bit, and I'm going to talk about the conference coming up in October 29th, 30th, and 31st in Houston, Texas. The conference on men's issues, and interestingly enough, the main theme of this conference is going to be about anti-gynocentrism. Now, that's going to be an interesting proposition because humans are just programmed toward gynocentrism. I know that there are some on the extreme fringes of the MGTOW community that think you can just swallow a red pill and all your tendencies toward gynocentrism will go away. You will lose your attraction for women. You will lose your desire to impress women or to please them. And you will be your own autonomous being. And of course, that is, I think, an extremely worthwhile goal. But we recognize in the reality of the human species that that is a lot easier said than done for most people. So what we have decided to do this year is to talk about the possibility, even within a subculture, not necessarily the culture at large, because, you know, let's face it, the culture at large likes desperate housewives. So, and are we going to reach those people? No, we're not ever going to reach those people. I think it was Carlin that said something about never underestimate the stupidity of the general public. Einstein said that only two things are infinite, and one is the universe and the other is stupidity, and I'm not so sure about the universe. So we have a big challenge in front of us, but as Dan was just bringing this up, the theme of ICMI 15 is going to be about the need to, as much as possible, destroy gynocentrism for there ever to be a meaningful connection again between men and women in this culture. And I think it's a good place to start. We don't pretend to have all the answers. You're going to hear from a variety of people talking on different subjects, but they're all geared toward one thing. And the way we're going to demonstrate it visually is from a meme I made some time ago that showed a guy on a white horse, and it showed a woman on a pedestal, and underneath it the caption reads, "The only way we'll ever reach gender equity is for both of these people to dismount." And that is a hard job to accomplish, wouldn't you say so, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the underlooked things, or the overlooked things, whichever you want to put it, aspects to feminism that people don't realize is that it's not just the man bad that is destructive to society. It is also the woman good. Women have sunshine blown up their asses their whole lives. You know, like how could you be a well-adjusted human being if that's what you're experiencing?
I think Bill Burr put it very well. That women have this tornado of misinformation about themselves circling around their heads all the time, and it comes out in expressions like being a mother is the hardest job in the world. That is gynocentrism to its core. Of course, it's bullshit. There's a million jobs harder than being a mother. There was probably, I would say, a time given wherever we were technologically 150, 200 years ago, where being a mother was the easiest job that you could have in the world, that everything else was pretty much harder. But anyway, going back, the friction that happens in this, do you see this as being a path that we can be on to correcting in the future, that we can find some sort of, if not all being in lockstep, which we don't want to all be in lockstep over everything, but some sort of unanimity between MRAs, MGTOWs, PUAs, and even some of the, if you look at the Australian Conservative, they're anti-feminist, but they're absolutely pro-white knight, that sort of thing. Can there be any sense of connected unanimity between these disparate entities that will serve?
There is already, though. That's the thing. Like we're like siblings that fight back and forth. We all interact. We all know who each other is. We all know what each other's ideas are. But we just don't agree on some things. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I really don't. As a matter of fact, that's how we grow.
Well,
sorry, I've
guess
got food poisoning right now, I'm sure, actually.
Oh, man,
I might not be
that's
talking
terrible.
very loud.
Sorry you don't feel well. Sorry to hear that.
It's okay.
I hope it wasn't the kitten tacos.
No.
Okay.
So.
Probably not. Probably talk of kitten tacos is not going to be right on your list right now, so I'll avoid the subject again. I was thinking more when I was talking about the friction. What I see is the tendency, and again, I'm guilty. I'm holding my hand up with this. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. But there's a tendency between these communities to talk in terms of, well, MRAs are trying to work with the system. That makes them part of the problem. They're trying to change laws and stuff. And actually, a lot of that's not true. We're about as anti-system as you can possibly get, at least at ABFM. But that's the perception. Then you hear from a lot of MRAs that PUAs are gynocentric pussies that mold and shape themselves in order to do anything just to get a woman to spread their legs. Therefore, they're really the problem. And then we say people that are doing game are selling themselves out and becoming something they're not in order to manipulate people, and that would be against a lot of what I would call MRA values. But it does reduce itself not into just expressing differences of approach, but into name calling and bitterness and division and attack articles on each other. And I, for one, having been someone that has fed into that and done it, am trying very hard to avoid that in the future and to understand that these are just different groups of people handling things in different ways.
It's chest puffery. When everybody argues and they try and knock each other down, it's just chest puffery. It won't go away.
Yeah.
No, it won't.
That's sad but likely true. Okay, let's talk a little bit. I had the pleasure for the first time of meeting you in person at the International Conference on Men's Issues in St. Clair Shores, Michigan, and got to meet your wonderful girlfriend while I was there, and we got to get together, and one of the first things we did was have lunch with one of the biggest scumbags, I think possibly in journalism history, Jeff Charlotte. I'm just curious, is it because you and I were sitting at the same table, Jeff Charlotte was there, a couple of other people were there, and Jeff Charlotte was all interested in hearing some of the more heart-touching details of about how we have helped each other and what men have done with each other. And then, of course, he turned around and he wrote
the worst hit piece in the world.
Well, yeah, and it's the worst hit piece in the world for many reasons. One, it was, in terms of writing, it was a piece of shit. I mean, it was just almost utterly incoherent. He wandered all the way through it. He stabbed at making points that he never actually made, and just sort of went in circles. It was like, and the shame is, I've read Jeff Charlotte's work on some of his photo essays. He's a good writer and has depth and has a good understanding of humanity. Yet when he wrote this piece on us, it was like a fourth grader was given a crayon and say, you know, tell us about what you did at the men's conference. Did you get vibes from him at the time that this guy was as unctuous as he turned out to be?
Well, yeah, but he's a journalist.
Okay, well,
you know,
okay.
Like that. Next. Last one of them were like, I've got a hidden agenda. Tell me your secrets. You know.
Yeah. You can trust me.
Yeah, trust me. I'm from the government. No. The whole thing about that stupid article that just keeps running through my head is, you get 3 days with Paul Elam, you get 3 days with Tara Parmadia, you get 3 days with any MRA that you want, all day. Any good investigative journalist would have used that opportunity to really dig deep and get right deep into it and find out what's really going on and write a big expose. And, you know, not this guy. This guy wrote a blog post he didn't have to even attend to write. It was pointless. And any journalist worth his salt is going to look at this and go, wow, you threw away a fantastic opportunity, and it's never going to happen again.
No, it's never going to happen again is right. We're going to be issuing at the next conference, by the way, we're developing a shit list there are certain journalists who will not be allowed to attend that conference. We'll give anybody that wants a first chance, but we don't give second chances after behavior like that. You know, the same thing would go for Mariah Blake and Monica Hess and Adam Serwer and a few of the others that had their stories written before they got there and then went skulking around like fucking snakes looking for something to fit the story they had already written. But other than that, how did you enjoy the conference? What was that experience like for you?
I thought it was actually very useful. Too short. I met a lot of people. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time talking. I met a lot of people there that I've been wanting to meet for a while, and everybody was suitably impressive. I really thought it was a worthwhile endeavor. I really
Dan,
did.
you are not looking well, buddy. We're gonna try to cut to the chase here. I'm going to cut off some of the other questions that I had for you, and I want to get to something that I think is very important if you're feeling up to it. And let me ask you, I mean, obviously you're not feeling well. We can reschedule this. You have a magazine coming out called The Red Pill, and I want to give that justice. Would you like to reschedule when you're feeling better?
That would be good. Yeah. Yeah, let's do, because you're right. This is all stuff that's really important, and I did not expect to be feeling like this. So I'm
Okay,
very
well,
excited.
it happens. Listen, I just hope you feel better soon, man. And apologies to viewers. We will have Dan Moore back, and we will spend the entire interview talking about this incredibly important project that Dan is undertaking in order to get the word of this literature out. All of it, from all facets of the manosphere, from the men's movement, will be going out to the public in a way that it hasn't before. I want to talk about that, but I want to do it when Dan is feeling up to it, and obviously something he ate is not agreeing with him. So let's let it go at that. Dan, thanks for showing up, and thanks for sticking in there even though you're sick. But let's talk as soon as you're feeling better, and we'll schedule another one of these to do.
Absolutely, Paul. I'd be more than happy to.
Okay, great. Listen, folks, thanks for showing up. Take care now. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.